Eve Frontier is a game that wants you to earn absolutely everything, and I mean everything. There's no real tutorial wizard handing you a starter frigate and patting you on the head along the way. It's just you in a wrecked bit of space and a galaxy that seems actively offended by your very existence. Before we dive into this one, this video is sponsored by Eve Frontier. I played Cycle 5 and came away quite impressed with the game, so I'm glad to be taking a look at Cycle 6. If what I say interests you, you can click the link in the description for access to the Founders Pack. Eve Frontier is building a persistent survival sandbox where you're going to carve out your own foothold, try and build something lasting, and then become part of the wider player-made civilization. My name is Tom and this is LT Gaming, and I'm checking back in on Cycle 6 Sanctuary for Eve Frontier. So the question here today is whether Cycle 6 can make Eve Frontier easier to get into without sanding away the harsh edge that the player base enjoys. Alright, let's jump into this one now. At its most basic, Eve Frontier is a hardcore space survival MMO. You begin as a rider, which is essentially a clone body sent into a broken corner of the galaxy, and you're linked in with your ship. Unlike traditional EVE Online, of which I was a huge fan of back in the day, you don't have this large tactical overview. It's much more immediate. You're physically moving through this world in third person with 6 degrees of freedom. You're flying through wreckage, scanning systems and mining asteroids while dealing with hostile feral drones, and then of course trying not to become an easy prey for someone who's been in the game longer than you have. The survival loop is really the heart of it though. You start small, basic ship, limited resources, not much protection. And to be really frank with you all, the galaxy is not interested in making your time here comfortable. It's one of the more punishing games I've played in quite a while, and I mean that as a compliment. From this scary opening, your aim is to grow, build up your vessel, establish a base, set up some manufacturing, and then join up with other players. The ambition ultimately is that you all band together into connected settlements, and these settlements are player-run infrastructure across the frontier. Now I found all this genuinely interesting because it's not chasing the survival game loop that is the norm. It wants your survival to actually lead somewhere, where you build something useful to other people, maybe a safe place to dock, securing a supply route, a defended outpost, or even just part of a larger economic output. So this brings us into the big changes in Cycle 6. So I played Cycle 5 and the core did work for me. I felt proper sense of danger, I felt the proper sense of progression, and I slowly earned my way into the wider world. But it was a lot of guesswork and figuring things out on my own. Now Cycle 6 Sanctuary is designed to give the opening more structure. You begin inside a building called the Creche, which looks impressive. You scavenge the ruins around you, build the essential tools you need, and then get out there, establish a refuge, before pushing out further into the frontier. Compared to the previous intro in Cycle 5, I think it does a lot better job at getting what the point of the game is across and giving you a little bit of guidance in the beginning when you need it. But the two big changes this cycle, which I'll get into next, are the modular vessels and the fact that Frontier itself now is trying to kill you as well. So the starting point is a lot more legible now, easier to understand, and this builds into the other major addition and change, which is modular vessels. Rather than simply moving from one fixed ship to the next, you begin with this root vessel and then build onto it with new modules as you progress. I think this is a cracking fit for what Frontier is trying to be. Your ship isn't just simply transport, it is your lifeline. It's how you explore, gather resources, fight back against the universe who's trying to kill you all the time. And this means your vessel has to evolve to the way you're playing. I made a vessel that has a ton of capacitors, plenty of extra cargo room, and the ability to repair my hull when I got into a scrape, and this suited my playstyle, bouncing around belt to belt looking for resources, clashing with rats and other players. It was shaped by my playstyle and I really like this side of things. The other big direction this cycle so far is that the galaxy itself is part of the survival challenge. Environmental hazards now affect your rider, your ship and your scanning, so how safely you can move through a system. This includes thermal conditions, electromagnetic interference and even gravitational effects. So it really simulates how a universe would be a very hostile place to be out and about in. So you combine this along with the fact you can modularly design your ship, and it feels like this game is becoming a survival space sim, which is going to appeal to a lot of players, I believe. A quick shout out now that many of you watching are not subscribed. If you do enjoy this style of content, give the video a like, get us out there on the algorithm, and consider subscribing. It really helps us grow the channel, and we're going to keep you up to date with all things gaming. So while I was out in the frontier, I ran into fellow YouTuber Obsidian Ant, a good friend of the channel, and we ended up chatting for ages about how the game was going for both of us, what we liked, what frustrated us a bit, where things were clicking and where they absolutely weren't. And what struck me was how similar our experiences were. The highs do feel genuinely earned, but the lows, when they hit, tended to hit in exactly the same places. I'll get into specifics, but suffice to say, we agreed more on than we disagreed on. So one thing eFrontier does well is it reaches beyond the usual survival game formula. The early game is about keeping yourself alive, very standard stuff. But the larger idea is that survival becomes collective. Tribes, shared bases, connected infrastructure. Cycle 6 is pushing that further with dormant gates. So ancient gates players repair by contributing resources. Once restored, they will open new regions. The world moves forward because players make it move forward. And this is a very interesting premise than just, for example, hitting a level requirement. And this is where the seasonal cycle structure comes in. You'll earn grace through activities, convert it into Eve points at the end of a cycle, and carry some progress forward. But there is a small gap in this, and Obsidian Ant and I felt the same way. The game still lacks a strong apparatus for that teamwork to actually unfold. Right now, solo play is the norm. The systems meant to pull players together are there in principle, but the scaffolding isn't yet. You can group up, but the game isn't really pushing you towards it or even rewarding you for it. Now this game is far from static, so I expect some leaps and bounds in this area soon, so something worth watching. Right, moving on to the part where I do think Frontier can do something very different from other games out there, and this centers around the Smart Assemblies feature. These are player-built structures that become real infrastructure, managing resources, supporting production, essentially forming the backbone of settlements that are built by players rather than dropped in by the devs. So you don't put down walls and storage boxes, the goal is to create systems other players can actually use, trade through, defend, and of course try to exploit. That's the promise, but it ties back to the teamwork gap. Smart Assemblies only reach their potential when players have proper reason to build together. They're also programmable too. I haven't delved into this side of it, but some players in game told me, for example, when you entered different storage units, last cycle people would be playing games like Doom through the storage unit. Sounds really unique and cool, and it shows the potential of what you can do with this system. Now it definitely needs a little bit more time in the oven, but once Cycle 6 begins to unfold, I'm really curious about what players start building. Now, for all of these ambitious systems that they've got going on, eFrontier is still in an alpha, and alpha means alpha. Obsidian Ant and I compared our notes extensively, and we did hit the same walls. Resource distribution could feel properly uneven, not go explore further uneven, but I cannot physically proceed uneven. I got trapped in systems a few times. It was hard to tell if the game was being demanding or just a little bit broken. But one of the real pain points for me was when bugs set me back hours. Feral drones aren't supposed to attack your storage, that's not an intended mechanic. So when I logged in one morning to find 3 storage containers gone, just completely poof, gone, that was hours of work vanished. So harsh at times, rewarding at others, but when it tipped too far into harsh, it wasn't always for the right reasons. That being said, the dev team is fantastic. They are on the pulse of things, extremely responsive, changes get made quickly, you can tell they're listening in. For a game this early, that is not something to take for granted. Cycle 6 does look like a smart response to the problems Cycle 5 had, clearer survival loops, more structured opening, modular ships and environments that make exploration deliberate, but open questions do remain. How much content is beyond the starter systems? How does that progression look like for someone playing 5 hours versus a week versus months? And the big one is, can smart assemblies and player infrastructure actually deliver on emergent civilization? Now, at this stage, these aren't criticisms. I think these are the right questions for an alpha game to be getting, and the challenge is making sure all these systems connect into a world that feels demanding without being needlessly difficult to understand. So LT gamers, eFrontier is still early. It's rough in places, and it's still asking players to meet it halfway, but Cycle 6 does look like a meaningful step forward. The core loop was already there for me in the previous cycle, starting with little, earning your upgrades and slowly pushing into this hostile universe. But now there's a clearer path into that world, a structured survival opening, and your ship grows around your choices. Environments make things feel a bit more deliberate. Can they pull off this grand vision in the long run? I don't actually know, but I'm going to keep playing and see how it unfolds. I'm there for the journey. Thanks again to eFrontier for sponsoring the video. Link in the description for founder access or your free trial. Let me know in the comments, have you played this game before? Does it feel like the right direction? I'm really curious to hear. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Bye bye now.